As I mentioned earlier, we're now 2 years and 2 months in, or 2 years and 1 month into the lawsuit. SEC filed suit against us, saying that our sales of XRP represented sales of unregistered securities. And from the beginning, I thought it was very clear that the facts were on our side and the law was on our side. And I think as you have seen this play out and you've seen the filings in the court, that the judge certainly is hearing our arguments. There's been, I think, the SEC's behavior, and some of it has been, I would say embarrassing as a U.S. citizen. That just some of the things you've seen happen, you're like, you've got to be kidding. But look, it's now fully filed and fully briefed in front of the judge in the second district, and we expect a decision from the judge certainly in 2023. But you don't really have any control over when a judge makes their decisions, and I'm optimistic that sometime in the coming single-digit number of months we'll have closure there. To your question about settlement, I mean, the problem here is the SEC, in particular Gary Gensler, has articulated a view that all crypto is a security. The only way that Ripple would settle, and I've said this at the very beginning, the only way we would settle is if there's clarity that XRP is not a security on a go-forward basis. So you have this conundrum where the SEC is saying all crypto is a security. We're saying there's only a settlement if we can say XRP is not a security on a go-forward basis. So the Venn diagram for settlement is, I think, zero. So I think we're going to end up letting the judge decide, and I'm very optimistic. And I think people here in this audience know, and here at Davos know, this case is very important to crypto, not just for Ripple. It's for the whole industry. And I think that the fight that we've been fighting really, in some ways, has been for the whole industry.
And in terms of the SEC specifically, you've been critical of the way the US has approached regulation towards the industry. What exactly are you concerned about, and why are you critical of the way the US is approached?
Well, two things. One, something called regulation through enforcement is never a particularly efficient way to regulate, right? If you want to regulate, do the work, write the rules, codify the rules. And when a company comes to you and says, hey, help me understand the rules, I want to make sure we're following the rules, help them understand the rules. I met personally with the SEC 3 times. Not once in those meetings did the SEC ever say to me, hey, and by the way, we're totally transparent about what we're doing. Not once did the SEC say, hey, we think XRP might be a security. So then for later on to go back and say, hey, the whole time we thought XRP was a security, we just didn't tell you. That doesn't feel like a genuine partnership between public sector and private sector. Moreover, and some of this stuff I'll be more vague about because some of this stuff, it hasn't been public yet. But there's something called the Hinman email. Bill Hinman, the director of corporate finance at the SEC, gave a speech in June 2018 about how ETH had been a security, but had magically become not a security. And there's some emails associated with that the judge turned over 6 times. We finally did get those emails. And I think when those come to light, I think you will see more kind of like, how is it possible the SEC decided to bring a case against Ripple, given what they were saying within their own walls?
Yeah, and then if you look at the global regulatory landscape, where do you think is sort of on the right track? In the European Union, you've got this MiCA regulation coming in, which sort of specifically targets things like stable coins and exchanges. Is that a good first step? I mean, where do you see good regulation or good talk about regulation happening?
So I think MiCA is a good first step. And I also, maybe not dodging your question, I'll get there, but I think one of the things that I have been struck by is how much the US regulatory discussion has dominated some of the meetings I've been in here in Davos. And it loses sight of the fact that globally, the direction of travel on crypto regulation is actually quite positive. You have more and more countries doing the work to codify and be clear. And these aren't small countries. This includes the UK and Japan, certainly here in Switzerland, Singapore, the UAE. You're even seeing countries like South Africa start to do that work. And again, instead of regulation through enforcement, it's actually, hey, let's take the time, let's partner with private sector to write down and be clear about those rules. So leaving the US aside, I think it's actually quite positive. And yes, the US is the largest economy in the world, but there's a big economy out there. And again, Ripple has thrived over the last 2 years, and we basically haven't been able to sell into the United States market.